Medicine today feels advanced, logical, and grounded in science. We have hospitals, laboratories, and shelves of carefully tested treatments. But in the medieval world, health was far more uncertain. People lived among plagues, injuries, and illnesses they did not fully understand. And yet, they tried. They experimented, invented, and passed remedies from one generation to another. To us, many of these cures seem strange, even absurd, but in their time, they made sense. They were born from observation, tradition, and the desperate hope of survival. Tonight, we will wander through those forgotten cures, not to laugh at them, but to understand them. From bizarre ointments to unusual diets, from leeches to potions, medieval medicine offers a curious mirror of human creativity under pressure. And as you listen, let the strangeness of their world drift over you, not as horror, but as quiet fascination. For even in the oddest remedies, there is the heartbeat of history, reminding us that people long ago struggled with the same desire we still have, to heal, to endure, to live. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy these calm explorations into the past. Now let's begin our quiet walk through the weirdest cures of medieval medicine. What would you think if you walked into a medieval healer's workshop? You would not find white coats, polished steel tools, or bottles neatly labeled in cabinets. Instead, you might see bundles of dried herbs hanging from rafters, jars of powders and pastes, bowls of animal fat, even cages of leeches wriggling in water. The healer might crush a plant in a mortar, whisper instructions, then hand you a mixture of ingredients that sound more like a recipe than a cure. To modernize, this looks like superstition or even nonsense. But to the people of the Middle Ages, it made perfect sense. Their world of medicine was built on the best knowledge they had, mixed with tradition, trial, and hope. The strangeness begins with perspective. Today, we understand disease in terms of bacteria, viruses, and chemistry. But in the medieval world, illness was explained differently. People believed health depended on balance of the body, of nature, of the environment around them. When balance broke, sickness followed. To restore balance, remedies were used: bleeding, purging, strange foods, unusual ointments. These sound odd to us, but they matched the logic of their time. And once you accept that framework, even the strangest cures no longer seem foolish. They seem necessary. Another reason medieval medicine feels strange is its closeness to daily life. Modern medicine is separate, hidden in clinics and hospitals. But in the Middle Ages, remedies came from kitchens, gardens, and markets. A mother treating a child's fever might use garlic, vinegar, or honey. A farmer with an aching tooth might chew herbs to numb the pain. A healer would mix powders from plants, metals, or even animal parts. Medicine was not a distant science, it was woven into ordinary life. That closeness makes it look strange now, because we are used to medicine being separate, sterile, and professional. We also forget how limited their options were. Painkillers as we know them did not exist. Antibiotics were centuries away. Surgery was dangerous and crude. So, when faced with wounds, fevers, or epidemics, people used whatever they could. If an herb soothed pain, it was valuable. If a strange mixture seemed to reduce swelling, it was worth repeating. Even if the logic was flawed, the intention was clear: relief. To survive in a world of uncertainty, strange cures were better than no cures at all. The environment added to this strangeness. life in medieval towns and villages meant constant exposure to dirt, spoiled food, and poor water. Illnesses were common, and their causes invisible. Without microscopes, people explained sickness with what they could see: spoiled air, unclean surroundings, or an imbalance in the body. Strange cures often addressed these visible factors: burning herbs to cleanse a room, carrying fragrant flowers to ward off bad air, or applying hot poultices to draw out disease. All were attempts to make sense of what could not be seen. Yet if we look closer, we find that not everything was foolish. Many strange remedies had real effects, even if their logic was incomplete. Honey, often used to cover wounds, does in fact kill bacteria. Willow bark, chewed for pain, contains the same substance later refined into aspirin. Garlic, onions, and vinegar, staples in medieval cures, do fight germs. These treatments may have been wrapped in odd rituals, but they carried genuine power. What looks strange to us often worked better than we assume. Another factor is time. Our own medical practices, if seen centuries from now, may look just as strange. Imagine future generations reading that we injected toxins to treat illness, or swallowed chemicals with long lists of side effects, or cut open bodies with metal tools. To them, our medicine might seem brutal, even primitive. Perspective changes everything. For the medieval healer, their strange cures were as logical as our pills and vaccines are to us. The difference is knowledge, not intention. So, why does medieval medicine look so strange to us today? Because we judge it by modern standards, forgetting the world it belonged to. We see odd ingredients and unusual methods, but they saw survival. We see superstition, but they saw logic built from the knowledge available. We laugh at their leeches and potions, but they lived by them. Their world was harsh, and they adapted with creativity, courage, and persistence.
What would you think if you stepped into a chamber centuries ago and saw a healer calmly fastening a wriggling leech onto a patient's skin? At first glance, it might look like cruelty or desperation. Yet in the medieval world, this sight was ordinary, even comforting. The patient might sit quietly, expecting relief, while the healer reassured them that the tiny creature, slowly drawing blood, was also drawing away sickness. To us, this feels strange, almost grotesque, but to them, it was medicine, grounded in a theory of balance that shaped centuries of care. The idea was simple but powerful. Health depended on harmony. The body was thought to be governed by elements, fluids, or forces that had to remain in balance. When illness struck, it was not seen as an invasion from bacteria or viruses, concepts unknown at the time, but as imbalance. Too much heat, too much cold, too much of one vital fluid, not enough of another. And if illness was imbalance, then the cure was to restore equilibrium. Bloodletting, whether through leeches or cuts, was a direct way to do this. Remove the excess, lighten the body, bring back harmony. It was a logic that, once accepted, made perfect sense. Leeches were the gentlest version of this practice. Kept in jars of water, purchased in markets, or gathered from marshes, they were applied to patients with surprising regularity. They attached to the skin, secreted a mild anesthetic that numbed pain, and drank slowly. To a medieval patient, this seemed miraculous. A painless release of blood, controlled and gradual. Healers could even move leeches to specific spots, believing each location targeted a different ailment. The humblest homes and the grandest courts alike used them, from villagers with fevers to kings with headaches. The practice was not rare, it was universal. Bloodletting by incision was harsher, but equally common. With a small blade or lancet, healers cut veins to release blood. Sometimes it was a few drops, sometimes a frightening amount. Patients were made to sit, bleed into bowls, and wait for dizziness to pass. Charts guided the practice, diagrams showing which veins to cut for which illness, instructions on how much blood to draw, and cautions against taking too much. Entire manuals were written on the art of letting blood, as if it were a craft equal to carpentry or weaving. And in many places it was. Barbers, often trained in minor surgery, were skilled at it. Their striped poles, which are still a symbol today, once represented the bandages and blood of their trade. What feels strangest is not that bloodletting existed, but how long it endured. For centuries, across Europe, the Middle East, and beyond, it was trusted. Patients demanded it, healers prescribed it, and entire economies grew around it. Leeches were traded across regions, their populations so harvested that some marshes were nearly emptied. Medical texts praised them as reliable tools. To question bloodletting was to question the foundation of medicine itself. And so it persisted, generation after generation, shaping how people thought of their bodies. But did it work? The answer is complicated. In many cases, it did nothing or even harmed. Losing too much blood left patients weak, dizzy, or worse. Yet in other cases, there may have been benefits. Leeches secrete anticoagulants that keep blood flowing, reduce clotting, and ease pressure in congested areas. Even today, modern medicine uses leeches in microsurgery to restore circulation. As for incision bloodletting, it sometimes reduced fevers temporarily or relieved pressure in infections. The logic was flawed, but the practice was not always useless. This mixture of harm and occasional benefit explains why it endured so long. People saw results, or at least believed they did. The deeper truth is that bloodletting fit the worldview of the time. It matched the theory of balance, offered a visible act of healing, and gave patients a sense of care. In a world where illness was frightening and mysterious, to see blood leave the body was to see sickness leaving. The ritual mattered as much as the result. The patient felt attended to, the healer felt effective, and society felt order restored. Strange as it seems, it was medicine not only for the body, but for the mind. And perhaps that is why it fascinates us today. We see in bloodletting a practice both alien and familiar. Alien because it looks brutal. Familiar because it reveals the same human impulses we still hold: to act against sickness, to trust systems of knowledge, to believe in the tools at hand. Our own medicine, centuries from now, may seem just as strange. Future generations may ask why we pumped chemicals through veins, or irradiated tissues, or swallowed bitter pills. To them, it may look as odd as leeches do to us. Perspective changes everything. So, as you rest tonight, imagine a medieval healer's room. A patient sits by candlelight, a bowl beside them, a leech working quietly on their arm. The healer watches, calm, confident, as balance is slowly restored. Strange to us, yes, but to them, it was hope. And in the end, hope itself is a kind of medicine, one that never goes out of fashion.
Imagine stepping into a medieval kitchen, not to cook supper, but to prepare medicine. The same shelves that held flour, vinegar, and onions might also hold remedies for fever, cough, or aching joints. The same garden that produced carrots and cabbage might also supply herbs for poultices, teas, and mysterious brews. To us, medicine belongs in pharmacies and hospitals, sealed in bottles, precisely measured by professionals. But in the medieval world, the border between food and medicine was thin, sometimes invisible. The kitchen was the pharmacy, the garden was the dispensary, and strange potions, made of plants, roots, spices, and sometimes stranger things, were a vital part of survival. To modern eyes, these potions look peculiar. A mixture of garlic, wine, and honey to treat infections, a tea of nettles to cleanse the blood, a syrup of onions to ease coughs. Some recipes called for vinegar boiled with herbs, others for roots ground into pastes, others still for seeds soaked overnight in ale. The instructions were often imprecise. A handful of this, a pinch of that, boil until it seems ready. Yet these brews were trusted and repeated across generations. They might sound odd to us, but they reflected the logic of the time. If the body was ill, the cure could be coaxed from the natural world around you. Garlic was among the most valued ingredients. Strong, pungent, and available in every garden, it was believed to ward off poison, cleanse the blood, and protect against illness. Combined with wine, it became a common potion for infections. Honey, another kitchen staple, was used not only for sweetness, but for its preserving and healing properties. Mixed into syrups and potions, it soothed throats, coated stomachs, and provided energy. Vinegar, sharp and acidic, was thought to cut through bad humors, so it appeared in countless brews, from simple tonics to elaborate mixtures. Herbs expanded the possibilities even further. Sage for memory, rosemary for circulation, mint for stomach aches, chamomile for sleep, nettles for cleansing, all were pulled from gardens and fields, dried, stored, and mixed into potions. To a medieval household, knowledge of herbs was as important as knowledge of cooking. Mothers, grandmothers, and healers carried recipes in memory, passing them to the next generation. Each plant had a character, a temperament, a purpose, and the art was in combining them. Stranger still were the additions that blurred the line between medicine and superstition. Crushed snails, powdered eggshells, ashes of burnt herbs, or even ground-up animal parts sometimes entered potions. To us, these sound bizarre, but to them, each ingredient carried symbolic power. The hardness of an eggshell might be thought to strengthen bones. The slime of a snail might soothe burns or wounds. Even the color of a plant mattered. Yellow flowers for jaundice, red roots for blood ailments. It was a kind of visual logic, a belief that nature itself offered clues for healing. Some potions worked better than expected. Onion and honey syrups, for example, do calm coughs. Mint soothes the stomach. Chamomile eases sleep. Garlic has antibacterial properties. These ingredients discovered by observation had real effects, though the reasons were unknown. Other potions were less effective or even harmful. But in a world without alternatives, they were willing to try anything. And because illness was common, people were willing to try anything. The line between nourishment and cure blurred until they were one. The act of preparing potions was as important as the potion itself. Crushing, boiling, stirring, straining, these were rituals of care. A healer or parent mixing herbs for a child's fever was not only making medicine, but showing attention, love, and hope. The warmth of the brew, the aroma of herbs, the sweetness of honey, all carried comfort, whether or not the potion truly cured. Medicine, after all, is never only chemistry. It is also reassurance. What fascinates us now is the creativity of these remedies. Without laboratories, medieval people relied on trial, error, and memory. They experimented with what they had: kitchen staples, garden plants, wild herbs, and local resources. Some mixtures were strange, others dangerous, but many revealed genuine insight. Modern pharmacology owes much to these early experiments, even if they seem laughable now. Aspirin comes from willow bark, morphine from poppies, digitalis from foxglove, all once used in crude potions long before science refined them.
So why do these medieval brews look so strange to us today? Because we live in a world of labels, doses, and precision. We expect pills identical in size and effect, measured to the milligram. Medieval medicine was looser, based on instinct and tradition. What worked for one might fail for another. Recipes varied by village, healer, and season. To us, that variability looks unreliable. To them, it was simply the way of life. As you drift into rest, picture the scene of a medieval kitchen at dusk. A pot simmers on the fire, the air rich with the scent of herbs. A wooden spoon stirs slowly, while bunches of dried plants hang from beams above. On the table, jars of honey, bowls of vinegar, bundles of garlic, roots freshly pulled from the earth. A healer leans over the pot, tasting, adjusting, pouring the brew into a clay cup. To us, it is strange. To them, it was medicine. And in its own way, perhaps it truly was.
Imagine walking into a medieval apothecary. The shelves are not only lined with jars of herbs and powders, but with stranger things: dried bones, ground horns, oils made from animal fat, sacks of crushed insects, and vials of liquids with faint, musky odors. To us, these look unsettling, even grotesque. But to people of the Middle Ages, they were medicines, sources of strength, cures for illness, and sometimes the last hope for survival. If the garden and kitchen could heal, then why not the animal world? After all, animals were seen not only as food or companions, but as living reservoirs of qualities that humans might borrow. Strong bones, sharp eyes, tough skin, quick recovery. Surely these could be transferred in some way. And so animal-based remedies, however strange, became an accepted part of medieval medicine. The logic behind these cures was both practical and symbolic. On one level, animals were abundant. Farmers and hunters could provide fat, hides, horns, or organs easily. Nothing went to waste. If part of an animal seemed to help, it would be collected and used. On another level, animals were thought to embody specific powers. A creature that survived harsh conditions might lend resilience. A bird that saw keenly might help human eyes. A beast known for strength might strengthen human bodies. This blending of observation and symbolism created a world where almost every animal part could become a remedy. Fat was among the most common ingredients. Rendered from pigs, cows, or geese, it was mixed with herbs to create ointments. Applied to burns, cuts, or aching joints, it provided a soothing layer, sealing in moisture and reducing pain. To modern science, this makes sense. Fat softens skin and carries medicinal herbs effectively. But to the medieval healer, the choice of fat mattered too. Goose fat was thought lighter, cow fat heavier, each suited to different ailments. The logic was less chemical than symbolic, but the results were often real enough. Bones, horns, and shells found their way into cures as well. Ground into powders, they were mixed into drinks or poultices. The hardness of bone was believed to transfer to human bones, helping fractures heal. Horns, especially from deer or other strong animals, were prized as symbols of vitality. Powdered antler might be prescribed for weakness or exhaustion. Even eggshells, crushed and swallowed, were thought to strengthen the body. These remedies may seem strange, but they reveal a deep belief in nature's ability to share its qualities if used wisely. Organs and blood appeared in remedies too. The heart of a strong animal might be dried and powdered, believed to boost courage or vitality. The liver of certain creatures, rich in nutrients, was thought to aid eyesight or cleanse the blood. Blood itself, consumed fresh or dried into powders, was believed to carry vitality into the body of the sick. To us, these ideas are unsettling, but to medieval minds,
the connection was logical. Life resided in blood, strength in organs, resilience in bones. To borrow them was to borrow life itself. Insects had a place in medicine too. Crushed beetles or ants were mixed into salves for skin conditions. Spiders, dried and powdered, were prescribed for fevers. Bees, more positively, gave honey, wax, and venom, each used in remedies. Honey soothed throats and wounds, wax sealed ointments, and venom, carefully administered, was thought to stimulate healing. Even lice and fleas, though pests, were sometimes bizarrely applied, their presence thought to draw illness away from the body. Strange though this seems, it was part of a consistent belief: everything in nature, no matter how small, might serve healing if used wisely. Fish and sea creatures contributed as well. Oils from fish were used to ease joints, shells were ground into powders, and even starfish or sea sponges occasionally appeared in texts as remedies. Salted fish skin might be applied to wounds, believed to draw out infection. Whale byproducts, rare and valuable, were mixed into ointments for special cases. The sea, mysterious and abundant, was another pharmacy, and healers did not hesitate to borrow from it. Some remedies combined animals with plants, creating mixtures that sound like recipes from another world. Fat mixed with herbs to soothe burns, honey blended with crushed insects for coughs, vinegar boiled with animal bones to strengthen the body. These potions seem bizarre to us, but they were carefully recorded, repeated, and refined. A healer's reputation often rested on such recipes, and families passed them down as treasured knowledge. What is striking is not only the strangeness, but the persistence. For centuries, these animal-based cures were used without question. They were part of the medical landscape, trusted by rich and poor alike. Kings might receive costly concoctions with exotic ingredients, while peasants relied on simpler versions with local animals. But both believed in the principle that animals carried powers humans could use. And while much of it was symbolic, some of it worked. Fat truly soothes wounds. Honey truly prevents infection. Bones and shells add calcium. Even leeches, so strange to us, have a medical role in preventing clots. The science was incomplete, but the practice was not empty. In their own way, medieval healers stumbled upon truths, wrapped in symbolism and strangeness, but truths nonetheless. So why do these remedies fascinate us today? Because they remind us that medicine is always shaped by culture. We see our hospitals as clean, logical, modern. But centuries from now, our treatments may look just as odd. Needles piercing skin, chemicals with side effects, machines humming around fragile bodies. What feels natural to us may look grotesque to the future. And so when we see medieval healers grinding antlers or applying goose fat, we should not only laugh, but recognize ourselves in them. Humans facing illness with creativity, courage, and whatever tools were at hand. As you drift toward rest, picture that medieval apothecary again. Shelves of jars, some filled with herbs, others with powders of bone, horn, or shell. Bowls of honey, pots of fat, bundles of dried insects. A healer moves quietly, measuring, mixing, creating a potion that seems strange to us, but to them was hope itself. The air smells of herbs and smoke, the fire crackles, and outside, life continues. Inside, the strange cures of the medieval world remind us that healing is not only science, it is also imagination.
What if the cure for your pain was spread across your skin instead of swallowed from a cup? In the medieval world, ointments, balms, and plasters were as common as potions. They were thick, fragrant, sometimes sticky, sometimes greasy, and often made from ingredients that today sound as strange as they smell. Instead of tablets or sterile creams, You might receive a salve made of goose fat, beeswax, and herbs, a plaster of clay mixed with vinegar and crushed insects, or a balm scented with rosemary and sage melted into oil over the fire. To us, these sound odd, even unpleasant, but to medieval people, these strange mixtures were often the most trusted cures of all. The logic was simple. What ailed you on the inside could often be drawn out through the skin. The body was seen as porous, open to influence. Illness could seep in, and illness could be pulled back out. Ointments and plasters were tools of extraction and protection. They warmed, soothed, covered, or drew out disease. They turned invisible sickness into something visible. A swelling reduced, a wound sealed, a rash soothed. In a world without modern antiseptics, these treatments gave patients the sense that something was being done, that the healer's hands had brought relief. Animal fats were the foundation of many ointments. Goose, pig, and cow fat, rendered and cooled, made the perfect base to carry herbs. Fat clung to the skin, softened wounds, and created a protective barrier against air and dirt. Into it went rosemary for circulation, sage for strength, lavender for calm, mint for cooling. These fragrant additions were not only symbolic, they often had real effects, reducing pain or inflammation. Beeswax thickened the mixtures, creating balms that could be stored for months, ready to be spread when needed. But not all ingredients were so pleasant. Some plasters called for crushed snails, thought to cool and soothe burns. Others used clay mixed with vinegar to draw out poison from bites or stings. Ground up animal parts, horn, bone, or even dried blood were sometimes added, believed to transfer their qualities into the body. Charcoal or ash might be included to absorb infection. To us, these seem unsanitary or bizarre, but to them, each had a meaning, a purpose, a logic of healing. One of the most curious practices was the use of drawing salves. These ointments were thick pastes designed to pull illness, pus, or pain to the surface. Mustard seeds, garlic, or other irritants were often added to stimulate the skin, creating redness and heat. To the patient, this felt like proof that the salve was working. Disease was being forced out. And though the reasoning was not scientific, sometimes it did help. Increased circulation, warmth, and mild antibacterial properties provided real relief. Plasters were another common form. Unlike ointments, which spread softly, plasters were firmer, often cloth or parchment spread with paste, then applied to the skin. They acted like bandages infused with medicine. Some were cooling, made of clay and herbs. Others were heating, made with mustard or pepper. Some were meant to stay on for hours, others for days. In towns and villages alike, healers prepared plasters in advance, ready for wounds, swellings, or fevers. They were the medieval equivalent of adhesive bandages and medicated creams, though far stranger to modernize. Perfume and scent also mattered. Strong-smelling herbs like rosemary, lavender, or camphor were added not only for their effects, but for their fragrance. Illness was often linked to bad air, so pleasant-smelling balms were believed to purify as well as heal. A patient wrapped in fragrant ointment felt protected, surrounded by the healer's care. The psychological comfort was as powerful as the physical treatment. These ointments and plasters were not only medical, but social. They were made by healers, yes, but also by families, especially women, who kept recipes in memory and practice. A mother might spread goose fat salve on a child's chest for coughs. A farmer might apply a clay plaster to an aching joint after long days in the fields. A traveler might carry a small tin of balm against insect bites or sores. Knowledge of these remedies was part of daily survival, shared across kitchens and workshops as naturally as cooking.
And, just as with potions, some worked. Honey and wax protected wounds. Garlic and onion reduced infections. Vinegar and clay soothed swelling. Even snail slime, odd as it sounds, contains compounds still studied for skin healing today. Wrapped in strange recipes and odd combinations, real medicine often lurked. The medieval healer did not know the chemistry, but they knew the results. And results mattered more than theory. What strikes us today is how tactile these remedies were. To be healed meant to be touched. Balm spread by hand, plaster pressed against skin, salve warmed over fire and gently applied. There was intimacy in the process, a closeness between healer and patient that modern medicine sometimes lacks. The act itself was healing, even if the cure was uncertain. So, why do these ointments, balms, and plasters seem so strange to us? Because we expect medicine to be clean, precise, and bottled. They expected it to be messy, sensory, drawn from nature, and shared by hand. Their world demanded creativity, and their cures reflect that. Strange though they seem, they carried hope, and sometimes genuine healing. As you drift towards sleep, picture a medieval room lit by firelight. On the table rests a bowl of melted fat, fragrant herbs crushed into it, beeswax cooling it into balm. A cloth spread with paste dries by the fire, ready to be applied. The healer tests the warmth with a fingertip, then turns to the patient, who waits with quiet trust. The balm may be strange, the plaster may be odd, but in that moment, surrounded by care and comfort, the cure has already begun.
Imagine yourself in a medieval town, its narrow streets crowded with noise and life. The air carries the smell of smoke from hearth fires, the tang of animals kept in yards, the aroma of bread baking in ovens. In this world, where sickness came suddenly and doctors were few, people turned to their senses not only to diagnose illness, but to cure it. To smell something foul or fragrant, to feel warmth or coolness against the skin, to listen for changes in breath or pulse. These were not just observations, but treatments. Healing was not always about swallowing a potion or applying a plaster. Sometimes it was about engaging the senses themselves: smell, touch, taste, and sound. And though these remedies now seem peculiar, to medieval minds they made deep sense. The power of smell was one of the most trusted tools. Illness was often thought to spread through bad air, so scents were more than comfort, they were protection. Bundles of herbs hung in homes, crushed into ointments or burned on coals to cleanse the air. Rosemary, lavender, sage, and mint were favored not only for their fragrance, but for their supposed power to drive away sickness. Patients might carry small pouches of dried flowers to sniff when passing through crowded streets. Physicians sometimes prescribed vinegar infused with herbs to be held to the nose, both to revive fainting patients and to ward off infection. To us, this looks quaint, but consider, many of these plants have antibacterial properties, and vinegar's sharpness can indeed clear the head. What feels strange today often hid practical wisdom. Perfumed cures extended further. Apples, lemons, and even oranges, rare and costly, were prized for their clean, sharp scent, believed to protect against disease. Candles were infused with herbs, rooms fumigated with resins like frankincense and myrrh. Smoke drifting through halls to drive out bad airs. For the sick, strong-smelling concoctions were pressed beneath the nose, onions, mustard, or garlic, whose pungency was thought to stir vitality back into a weakened body. In a world where infection often meant death, these scents gave people both protection and hope. Touch was equally central to healing. A good healer did not merely prescribe, they touched.
They pressed swollen joints, massaged aching muscles, laid warm cloths over fevers. They believed illness could be moved, soothed, or drawn out by the hand. Hot stones were sometimes wrapped and placed on the body to ease stiffness. Warm compresses of herbs were applied to sore throats or chests. Cold cloths, dipped in vinegar or water, cooled fevers. To us, this looks like simple comfort care, but comfort matters. The sensation of warmth or coolness on the skin reassures, calms, and in some cases truly helps. Even today, we rely on heating pads and cold packs. The medieval version was simply more fragrant, more tactile, more immediate. Massage was another strange but trusted cure. Using oils infused with herbs, healers massaged limbs to restore circulation, ease pain, and move humors through the body. Goose fat or olive oil provided the base. Rosemary or lavender added fragrance, and the healer's hands provided pressure. For broken bones or dislocations, manipulation by touch was attempted, sometimes crudely, sometimes with surprising skill. To touch the body was to know it, and touch was healing in itself. Sound, too, played a role. Though not obvious, some believed that certain rhythms, chants, or tones could calm the sick. Bells rung in villages were thought to purify the air. Drums, flutes, or simple humming might be used to soothe restless patients. The steady rhythm of lullabies or chants provided psychological relief, if not physical. Again, to us this looks like superstition, but modern science knows that rhythm and sound can affect heart rate, breathing, and mood. Medieval healers discovered this through experience, long before such effects had names. Taste was both medicine and test. Bitter herbs were given to cleanse, sweet syrups to strengthen, sharp vinegars to cut sickness. Patients were encouraged to taste certain mixtures as a way of judging their body's reaction. If something tasted repulsive, perhaps it was not the right cure. If it seemed pleasant, perhaps the body accepted it. This was intuition, not science, but it reflected a deep trust in the senses as guides to health. Some of these sensory cures look strange to us today because they blur the line between treatment and comfort. Was a lavender balm truly medicinal or simply calming? Was a warm compress therapeutic or just soothing? To medieval people, the distinction did not matter. Relief was relief, whether from chemistry or sensation. If smell, touch, or sound eased suffering, it was medicine. And in truth, some of these remedies had genuine effects. Aromatic herbs contain oils that fight bacteria. Vinegar can kill germs. Heat eases pain and stiffness. Cold reduces swelling. Massage stimulates circulation. Music and sound calm the nervous system. What we call alternative today was ordinary in the medieval world, and though the logic was wrapped in humors and airs, the results were sometimes real. But perhaps the most important lesson of these sensory cures is the closeness between healer and patient. To treat someone by touch, by scent, by sound, is to be physically present, to share space, to give comfort in a direct way. In the absence of pills and sterile tools, medicine was intimate. The healer's hand, the fragrance of herbs, the warmth of compresses, all spoke not only of cure, but of care. And care is always part of healing. So as you drift tonight, imagine a medieval chamber dimly lit by candles. Bundles of rosemary hang from the beams, their fragrance mixing with smoke from a small brazier. A healer lays a warm cloth, steeped in herbs, over a patient's chest. In the corner, a bowl of vinegar and mint releases sharp scents into the air. The patient closes their eyes, breathing slowly, listening to the soft hum of a lullaby. Strange to us, perhaps, but to them it was medicine, and perhaps, in its own way, it still is.
Imagine arriving at a healer's home in the late Middle Ages, your body aching with fever, or your head pounding with pain. You expect herbs, a plaster, or perhaps leeches, but instead, the healer asks you when you were born. They consult a chart, study the position of stars and planets, and only then decide what to prescribe. To us, this seems almost unbelievable. Why would the movement of distant lights in the sky determine the course of a sickness here on Earth? Yet for centuries, this was a respected, trusted, and widespread method of diagnosing and treating illness. Astrology and medicine were intertwined, partners in the effort to explain, predict, and hopefully cure the ailments of the human body. The key lies in how medieval people understood the universe. They believed the body was not separate from the cosmos, but part of it. The stars above, the seasons of the year, the phases of the moon, these were not distant or irrelevant, but intimately connected to human health. Just as tides rose and fell with the moon, so too, they believed, could the body's humors be affected by celestial rhythms. Illness was imbalance, yes, but imbalance could be triggered by movements in the heavens. To restore health, then, one had to read not only the patient, but also the sky. Physicians were often trained in both medicine and astrology, their studies covering anatomy, herbs, and planetary influences side by side. Charts called zodiacs of man illustrated the belief that each part of the body was ruled by a different sign: Aries the head, Taurus the throat, Gemini the arms, Cancer the chest, and so on. To know where illness struck was to know which constellation's influence was disturbed, and to treat it required aligning the cure with the heavens. A headache under Aries might call for one kind of bloodletting, while stomach troubles under Virgo called for another. To us, this seems fanciful. To them, it was structured, logical, and consistent. Timing was crucial. The best moment to administer a treatment, they believed, was when the stars and planets were favorable. Bloodletting, for example, should be avoided when the moon was in a sign ruling the part of the body being cut, lest harm be done. Herbal remedies, too, were gathered and given according to lunar cycles, certain plants thought strongest when harvested under particular skies. Even surgery, as limited as it was, might be scheduled to avoid celestial opposition. For the medieval healer, a cure poorly timed was no cure at all. Astrology also served as diagnosis. When symptoms were unclear, a physician might cast a horoscope for the moment the patient fell ill. This decumbiture chart was studied to reveal the cause and likely course of the sickness. Was recovery possible? Was death near? The stars were consulted for guidance, providing answers where the body alone seemed silent. This gave both healer and patient a sense of certainty, or at least direction, in an uncertain world. We might ask, did it work? The answer depends on how we define success. Astrological medicine did not cure infection or stop plague, yet it offered comfort, order, and meaning. It provided structure in chaos. Patients who saw their illnesses explained by the heavens felt less helpless, as if their suffering was not random, but part of a larger pattern. That reassurance itself was a form of healing. And sometimes by chance or observation, the timing of treatments aligned with real cycles in the body, producing genuine improvement. Even herbs gathered by lunar phase might be more potent simply because they were harvested at consistent times. What seems superstition now may have carried unintentional wisdom then. It is also important to see astrology not as separate from medicine, but as a part of its foundation. In universities, students studied both together. Great physicians of the age wrote about stars and herbs in the same breath. Calendars and almanacs filled with astrological advice were common tools for doctors and lay people alike. To reject astrology in that era would have been to reject medicine itself, for the two were inseparable. So why does this feel so strange to us? Because we live in a world where science has drawn sharp lines between the heavens and the body,
between astronomy and physiology. We know planets do not dictate digestion, that stars do not cause fevers, but the medieval world had no such separation. For them, the sky was a clock, a map, a code. It governed weather, harvests, and tides. Why not health? To treat the body without consulting the heavens would have felt incomplete, even reckless. And perhaps we should not be too quick to mock it. Consider how we still respect cycles of nature in subtle ways: daylight and darkness, the seasons of food, the rhythms of sleep. Our bodies are indeed shaped by patterns beyond our control. We do not call it astrology now, we call it biology. But the instinct is the same, to seek harmony between the human body and the world around it. As you drift into rest tonight, imagine the medieval healer at their desk. A candle flickers, casting light on a chart of stars inked carefully onto parchment. The physician traces lines with a quill, murmuring about the moon's position, the ruling sign of the afflicted part of the body. Outside, the night sky arches overhead, timeless and vast. To us, this is quaint, strange, outdated. To them, it was medicine, order, and hope. And perhaps even now, we can understand the comfort of believing that the body and the heavens move together, that illness has meaning, and that healing can be guided by the rhythms of the stars. All of this we can see in the tradition of medical astrology of the late Middle Ages.
Picture yourself in a medieval market square on a cool autumn morning. The air is heavy with the scent of roasting meat and damp straw. Traders shout their prices, and horses clatter across cobblestones. Among the stalls of vegetables and cloth, another figure arrives, strange, colorful, and loud. He carries a pack of jars and bottles that glint in the sun, and his cart is painted with symbols that catch the eye. This is not just a trader, but a traveling healer, wandering from town to town with promises of cures for every ailment. Healers like this were both admired and mistrusted, welcomed and ridiculed, yet they were essential to the fabric of medieval life. In an age when trained physicians were rare and costly, these wanderers brought medicine, or what passed for medicine, to the masses. And what they prescribed was often as strange as their appearance. The appeal of traveling healers lay in their performance. They were not quiet scholars in university halls, nor solemn physicians serving the wealthy. They were entertainers as much as medics, drawing crowds with dramatic words, clever tricks, and sometimes music. A healer might unroll a banner showing diagrams of the body, pointing at parts afflicted by pain. He would then reach into his pack and pull out a vial of liquid, perhaps red as wine, and declare it a cure for fevers. Another bottle, pale and cloudy, was promised to ease coughing. Dried herbs, powders, salves, and oils, each with a story, each with a price. The spectacle was part of the medicine. To watch, to laugh, to believe was already to feel relief. Their prescriptions were often peculiar. Some sold tonics made of vinegar, garlic, and honey, claiming they cured everything from stomach aches to plague. Others offered dried toads, ground into powder and swallowed to ward off poisoning. There were salves made of goose fat mixed with ashes, ointments of snail slime and herbs, and potions containing exotic spices like cinnamon or nutmeg. Rare luxuries turned into miracle cures. Traveling healers thrived on novelty. The stranger the ingredient, the more impressive the remedy seemed. To the medieval imagination, mystery itself was power. What made them effective was not only the oddness of their cures, but the hope they sold. For peasants who could never afford a learned physician, a traveling healer was often the only option. Whether or not the cure worked mattered less than the sense of being treated. A colorful potion, even if useless, gave comfort. A balm rubbed into the skin, even if ineffective, at least showed care. And in some cases, the remedies did help. Garlic did fight infection. Honey soothed wounds. Vinegar disinfected. Mixed among superstition were fragments of real medicine,
discovered by trial and error, repeated until they became tradition. These healers also served as carriers of knowledge. Wandering from place to place, they spread recipes, shared techniques, and carried herbs or substances unfamiliar to one region but common in another. A villager in the north might taste for the first time a southern spice. A farmer might hear of a new way to treat a wound. Knowledge in the Middle Ages did not only flow through books and universities, it flowed through these wandering figures, patchy, distorted, but vital. At the same time, suspicion followed them. Authorities often accused traveling healers of being quacks or charlatans. Some were indeed frauds, selling colored water as miracle tonics or staging tricks to convince crowds of their power. They might claim to draw worms out of a sick child's ear, when in truth, the worms were hidden in their hand all along. Yet even fraud had its effect. A mother who believed her child had been cured might feel relief so strong that the child's own condition seemed to improve. The line between trickery and healing was thin, blurred by belief, psychology, and desperation. Some healers mixed performance with real skill. A wandering barber surgeon might pull teeth, set broken bones, or lance abscesses in the open square, attracting horrified but fascinated crowds. Bloodletting was performed publicly, with bowls of crimson fluid displayed as proof of the cure. Others demonstrated the power of their ointments by applying them on animals, or by pretending to wound themselves and then healing the injury. It was theater, but it was also medicine in the only way many people could access it. The peculiar prescriptions of traveling healers also reflected the trade routes of their age. As merchants brought spices, minerals, and exotic goods into Europe, healers incorporated them into their remedies. A salve with cinnamon seemed magical, because cinnamon came from faraway lands. A tonic with saffron gleamed with exotic promise. Even powdered jewels were sold as medicine. Ground emerald for protection, ruby for strength, pearl for fevers. Expensive, impractical, but captivating. To drink a powdered jewel was not only a cure, but a statement of belief that beauty and rarity carried hidden power. Despite the suspicion, people relied on them. Villagers waited eagerly for their return. Children watched their shows with awe, and even skeptical adults might buy a potion, just in case. The world was uncertain, disease was common, and any hope was welcome. Traveling healers filled that need, offering a mixture of performance, superstition, and sometimes genuine relief. Looking back, we may see them as tricksters or fools, but perhaps they were something more. They were the bridge between knowledge and imagination, between science and story. They reminded people that healing was not only about the body, but about the spirit, that a show of care was sometimes as important as the cure itself. And in their wandering, noisy, peculiar way, they kept alive the idea that medicine was for everyone, not just the wealthy. So as you drift into sleep, picture a medieval square at dusk. The crowd has thinned, the healer's cart is half empty, bottles clink as he packs them away. A child clutches a small pouch of herbs, a mother holds a vial of syrup, and old man rubs balm into his aching joints. Strange cures, yes, but in their strangeness lay hope, and in their hope lay healing. The healer moves on to the next town, his lantern swinging, his songs fading into the night. And with him goes the peculiar wandering spirit of medieval medicine.
Imagine stepping through the narrow wooden door of a medieval apothecary. The air is thick with scent, sharp vinegar, sweet honey, dried herbs hanging in bundles, the earthy tang of roots, the bitter edge of powders ground from minerals. Light filters through small windows, glinting off rows of glass jars and ceramic pots stacked on shelves. Behind the counter stands the apothecary, part craftsman, part merchant, part healer. To us, this looks like a shop filled with odd ingredients, but to a medieval town, it was a place of wonder and necessity,
a pharmacy where strangeness and survival mixed in equal measure. The apothecary was more than a seller of medicines. He was a maker, grinding roots in mortars, distilling liquids through simple alembics, mixing powders into syrups. His shelves held not only local herbs, but exotic spices brought by traders: cinnamon, nutmeg, saffron, ginger. To customers, these were both luxuries and cures, purchased not only to flavor food, but to treat stomach pains, fevers, and weakness. In an age when most people relied on folk remedies made at home, the apothecary's shop felt specialized, professional, filled with knowledge that seemed just beyond ordinary life. But the remedies were often strange. Dried lizards ground into powder for cramps, pearls crushed and dissolved in vinegar as a tonic for strength, powders of antler, horn, or bone added to drinks for vitality, oils infused with rose or violet petals, not only to perfume, but to soothe the skin and calm the nerves. Even more curious were electuaries, thick pastes made of honey, spices, and medicinal powders rolled into little balls and eaten like sweets. To the medieval patient, these were both pleasant and powerful, a cure wrapped in sugar. The apothecary's jars sometimes held alarming ingredients. Mercury, arsenic, and lead were used in tiny amounts, thought to purge illness or strengthen the body. Though dangerous, they reflected the idea that strong substances carried strong effects. Exotic imports like amber, musk, or even powdered gemstones were prized, their rarity believed to add potency. The line between medicine and magic blurred here, yet the apothecary insisted on his craft. Careful preparation, measurement, and presentation gave these remedies authority. To visit the apothecary was as much an experience as a transaction. The patient described symptoms, the apothecary listened, nodded, and began to select jars. Powders were measured onto scales, liquids poured into vials, herbs tied in bundles. Instructions were given: how to boil, how to sip, how often to take. The ritual of preparation gave confidence. The shelves, the scales, the precise handling made the medicine feel official, even when the cure was as simple as mint tea or honey syrup. In truth, some of these remedies worked. Spices aided digestion, honey soothed throats, rose oil calmed the skin. Others were ineffective and some harmful. But the apothecary's role was not only about results, it was about reassurance. His shop symbolized order in a world of uncertainty. Here, in rows of jars and bundles of herbs, illness could be measured, named, and treated, even if imperfectly. And perhaps that is why the apothecary fascinates us today. His shop was a bridge between folk healing and professional medicine, between home remedies and the science that would come centuries later. Strange as his prescriptions seem, they represent the human desire to make illness tangible, to give it shape and counter it with crafted remedies. As you drift into sleep, imagine the apothecary's quiet shop at night. The fire burns low, shadows stretch across shelves of jars, and the scent of herbs lingers in the air. Outside, the town is dark and silent. Inside, rows of remedies wait, strange and curious, yet filled with hope. The apothecary closes his ledger, snuffs the candle, and leaves his little world of jars behind. Tomorrow, more patients will come, and more strange cures will be measured out. And so the rhythm of medieval medicine continues, steady, peculiar, and deeply human.
Imagine a dusty manuscript resting on the shelf of a medieval library, its pages thick with ink and strange diagrams, its margins crowded with notes written by careful hands.
Inside are not poems or chronicles, but recipes. Recipes not for food, but for healing. They list herbs to be gathered at dawn, powders to be ground on stone, fats to be melted into ointments, and instructions written with both precision and mystery. These were the hidden treasures of medieval medicine, passed from master to apprentice, guarded by healers, copied by monks, whispered in villages, and remembered by families for generations. To open such a book is to enter a world where healing was an art of memory, tradition, and trust, where every cure carried both practical advice and a touch of wonder. The manuscripts of medieval medicine were not uniform. Some were written in Latin, filled with scholarly references and elaborate diagrams, intended for physicians trained in universities. Others were written in local languages, simpler and more direct, meant for apothecaries, midwives, or literate households. A recipe might describe how to brew a potion of sage and wine for fevers, or how to prepare a plaster of clay and vinegar for swelling. Another might instruct that nettles be boiled and drunk in spring to cleanse the blood, or that mint be chewed after meals for the stomach. To us, these look like fragments of folklore, but they reveal a systematic attempt to record, preserve, and transmit medical knowledge. What makes these recipes fascinating is their blend of the ordinary and the bizarre. Alongside instructions for honey syrups or chamomile teas, one might find directions to grind pearls into powder for strength, or to place a live frog on a sore throat until it croaks away the pain. Some remedies required exotic imports, saffron from the east, cinnamon and ginger from distant lands, while others relied on what any villager could gather: garlic, onions, nettles, rosemary, vinegar. The balance between the familiar and the strange gave these recipes their power. To the patient, the mix of comfort and mystery created belief. Memory was as important as manuscripts. In many villages, recipes were never written, but passed orally, carried in the minds of mothers, midwives, and healers. A grandmother might whisper instructions for a fever potion to her daughter. Boil this herb, add that root, stir with a wooden spoon. A healer might teach an apprentice to recognize plants by touch, taste, and smell, guiding their memory through practice. To forget was to risk lives. To remember was to hold power. The transmission of medical knowledge depended on trust and continuity, and families guarded their recipes as treasures. Some manuscripts were practical, but others carried layers of symbolism. Instructions might say that herbs must be gathered under a full moon, or at sunrise, or only with the right hand. To us, these details look like superstition, but in practice, they ensured consistency. Herbs gathered at the same time of year, under the same conditions, would have similar potency. What looks like ritual was in some cases early quality control. The line between symbolism and science was blurred, but not meaningless. The recipes reveal a deep knowledge of plants and their effects. Peppermint to ease digestion, fennel for the eyes, willow bark for pain, poppy for sleep, thyme for coughs. Some were harmless comforts, others dangerously strong, but all were part of a living tradition of experimentation. If something worked, it was remembered, repeated, and eventually written down. If it failed, it might be altered or abandoned. Medicine grew not only in great schools, but in kitchens, gardens, and memories. Even stranger were the composite recipes, mixtures of dozens of ingredients, brewed into thick pastes or fermented drinks. One medieval eye salve, preserved in a manuscript,
combined onion, garlic, wine, and bile from a cow's stomach. To us, this sounds revolting. Yet, when recreated by modern scientists, it was found to kill antibiotic-resistant bacteria. 1,000 years ago, healers had stumbled upon a mixture that modern medicine only recently learned to appreciate. This is the hidden genius of medieval recipes. Among the strange and the symbolic, there were flashes of genuine, accidental brilliance. The apothecaries who copied and preserved these recipes were guardians of knowledge. Their shelves held jars of herbs, roots, powders, and dried animal parts, each labeled and arranged. They sold ready-made remedies, but they also prepared custom mixtures based on recipes requested by physicians or patients. Some apothecaries wrote their own recipe books, adding notes in the margins. This worked well for fevers in the summer, or this failed in cold weather. Over generations, these books became archives of lived medical experience, layered with the handwriting of many healers. But beyond manuscripts and shops, memory remained vital. In rural areas, far from towns, literacy was rare, and families relied on oral tradition. Remedies were sung in rhymes to help children remember, or encoded in proverbs so they could be passed casually in conversation. The line between medicine and folklore blurred until they were indistinguishable. To drink nettle tea in spring was both a cure and a seasonal ritual. To chew fennel seeds was both a remedy and a habit. Medicine was not separate from life, it was woven into it. This blending of text and memory shaped the legacy of medieval medicine. Strange though the recipes seem, they preserved continuity, carried fragments of truth, and kept alive the belief that illness could be met with action, not despair. In their jars of powders and in their whispered instructions, we see the persistence of hope. As you drift into rest, imagine a medieval scribe hunched over a manuscript, carefully copying a recipe in neat script. Take sage, boil in wine, strain, and give warm to the sick. The ink is dark, the parchment rough, the words simple. Centuries later, a grandmother repeats the same recipe aloud to her grandchild, who watches as herbs boil in a pot by the fire. 1,000 years separate them, yet the knowledge flows, unbroken, from manuscript to memory, from page to mouth, from healer to patient. Strange, yes, but in that continuity lies the true legacy of medieval healing.
Picture a bustling medieval marketplace. The air is full of noise, merchants calling out prices, livestock bleating, children darting between stalls, and above it all, the steady murmur of bargaining. Between stalls piled with apples, bolts of cloth, and iron tools, you notice another kind of stall. Its table is lined with jars of powders, bundles of herbs tied with twine, small vials of colored liquid glinting in the sun. Hanging from the beams are dried fish bladders, bundles of roots, even skins of animals with their parts carefully preserved. This is not a grocer or a blacksmith. This is a seller of remedies, part healer, part merchant, whose business was to provide hope in the form of strange cures. In the medieval world, medicine was not only prepared in private homes or apothecaries, it was bought and sold in markets, traded as goods, bartered for grain or eggs, carried across borders as valuable cargo. And it was here, in the noise and dust of the market square, that the strangest remedies often changed hands. The market was where knowledge and commerce met. Villagers brought herbs they had gathered in fields and forests, selling them in bundles. Traders carried exotic spices, cinnamon, saffron, nutmeg, whose high prices reflected both rarity
and supposed healing power. Apothecaries sent apprentices to buy animal parts, bones, horns, fat, dried livers, or even ground shell. Traveling healers set up temporary stalls, offering potions and plasters directly to the public, performing demonstrations to attract buyers. For many people, this was their first encounter with medicine outside the home. They could see it, smell it, touch it, and take it home wrapped in cloth or tied in a pouch. The remedies themselves were as strange as the setting. One merchant might sell powders of crushed pearls, promising strength and longevity. Another might hawk dried toads or frogs tied in small bags to be worn as charms against disease. Ointments of goose fat, sold in clay pots, were advertised for joint pains. Vinegar infused with garlic and onions was bottled as a cure for coughs. The boldest sellers displayed jars containing live leeches wriggling in water, ready to be taken home for bloodletting. Even stranger items like powdered antlers, dried spiders, or fish oils were displayed openly. The marketplace mixed the familiar and the bizarre until they became inseparable. The performance of the sellers was as important as the goods. To attract a crowd, a healer might loudly describe how his potion had saved a nobleman's life, or how his ointment had cured dozens of fevers in a last village. Some sellers demonstrated their wares by applying ointments to their own arms, or by pretending to swallow their powders with ease. Others offered free samples, drops of syrup on the tongue, a sniff of an aromatic herb, enticing customers to buy more. The more unusual the remedy, the greater the spectacle. And in an age when illness was frightening and medicine scarce, the performance worked. Crowds gathered, coins changed hands, and strange cures spread from village to village. Yet these marketplaces were not merely about trickery. They were also centers of real knowledge exchange. A housewife buying herbs might share her own recipe for a cough syrup with the seller, who would repeat it in the next town. A shepherd might trade nettle roots he had dug up in the hills, telling stories of how they had healed his family. Merchants listened, observed, and passed recipes along with their goods. In this way, markets became places where medical traditions mingled and grew, even when the cures seemed peculiar. The atmosphere of the market gave medicine a certain authority. Surrounded by trade and negotiation, remedies took on the weight of commerce. If a powder could be weighed on scales like grain, if a potion could be sold in jars like oil, then surely it was real. The act of buying and selling lent legitimacy, turning home remedies into commodities. Medicine became something you could purchase, something with value measured in silver coins or in the eggs and wool offered in barter. This commercial aspect made medicine accessible, but also shaped its perception. A cure was not just knowledge, it was a product. Some remedies worked. Honey sold in jars soothed wounds and throats. Garlic bundles reduced infections. Vinegar solutions cleaned wounds. Herbal teas of chamomile or mint calmed nerves and stomachs. These were effective, even if wrapped in layers of exaggeration. Others were useless, even dangerous, but they carried the weight of belief. And belief itself was powerful. A mother who returned home with a pouch of dried herbs felt she had done something for her sick child. And that act of care mattered deeply, whether or not the herbs worked. The market for medicine also created networks. Rare ingredients like saffron, cinnamon, and nutmeg arrived through long trade routes, carried by caravans and ships from distant lands. Their presence in medieval stalls shows how global the search for cures already was. Local remedies met imported luxuries, and both became part of the medieval medical imagination. To sip a tonic with cinnamon was to taste both medicine and the wider world. In many ways, these markets foreshadowed the pharmacies of the future. They created a place where remedies were bought, measured, and trusted. They taught people to expect that illness could be answered with a substance, a mixture, a purchased cure. And they preserved traditions, blending them with new discoveries, until medicine became a shared cultural practice. Strange as the remedies were, they built habits that endure. The habit of seeking relief outside the home, the habit of trusting substances packaged and sold, the habit of believing that health could be bought, bottled, and carried away. As you drift to sleep, imagine that medieval marketplace once more. The noise fades, the stalls are closing, but the smell of herbs lingers in the air. A woman carries home a small jar of ointment wrapped carefully in cloth. A man tucks a bundle of garlic and sage into his pouch. A child clutches a vial of sweet syrup given as a sample. The square empties, shadows lengthen, and the healer's cart rattles away down the road. Strange remedies have changed hands, mixed with coins and hope, and tomorrow they will be brewed, spread, or swallowed in homes across the land. In their strangeness lies not only curiosity, but the timeless human desire to heal.
What if the strangest cures of the medieval world, the ones that sound laughable to us today, were sometimes the very ones that truly helped? It is tempting to imagine medieval medicine as nothing more than superstition, a jumble of odd mixtures and misguided logic. Yet when we look more closely, when we sift through recipes, chronicles, and archaeological evidence, we discovered that many so-called strange remedies actually worked. They were not scientific in the way we define science now, but they were practical, born of observation, repetition, and survival. They revealed that medieval people were not foolish, but resourceful, experimenting with what they had until they found what offered relief. And in some cases, their strange cures anticipated discoveries that modern medicine would only confirm centuries later. Consider the use of honey. Medieval healers spread it over wounds, mixed it into drinks, and used it to preserve ointments. To us, this sounds like nothing more than a sweetener misplaced, but honey contains natural antibacterial properties, preventing infection and promoting healing. In an age without antibiotics, it was one of the most effective substances available. A knight injured in battle, a peasant cut in the fields, a child with a burn, all could benefit from honey applied directly. To the medieval healer, it was a trusted ingredient. To modern researchers, it is validated as one of the simplest yet most powerful remedies nature provides. Garlic was another strange but successful cure. Crushed into pastes, boiled in wine, or mixed with vinegar, it was given for coughs, infections, and even plague. Its sharp smell and taste were thought to drive away sickness, and though it could not stop the plague, garlic does have antimicrobial qualities that fight bacteria. Even today, garlic extracts are studied for their effects on health. What we laugh at as medieval superstition was, in fact, early medicine born of trial and error. Willow bark, too, deserves mention. Used as a tea or chewed directly, it eased pain and reduced fevers. Medieval people did not know why, it was simply known to bring relief. Centuries later, chemists isolated salicylic acid from willow, leading to the creation of aspirin. What we consider a modern invention was, in truth, a rediscovery of something medieval healers already practiced. Their strange bark teas were working in ways they could not explain, but effectiveness does not depend on explanation. Leeches, often ridiculed as grotesque tools of quackery, also had their place. While excessive bloodletting could weaken patients, leeches secreted anticoagulants that improved circulation and prevented clotting in delicate areas. Modern surgeons still use them after reconstructive surgeries to keep blood flowing in reattached limbs and tissues. What was once dismissed as medieval folly is, in fact, still a tool in advanced hospitals today. Even stranger remedies sometimes carried hidden wisdom.
Onion and garlic mixed with wine created a potion that, according to a surviving medieval recipe, could cure eye infections. Modern experiments have shown that this mixture kills antibiotic-resistant bacteria. What seems like kitchen magic may have been a powerful, though accidental, antibiotic. The healers who used it could not have known the science, but their patients would have felt the results. Herbal remedies also held unexpected truths. Chamomile, used for calming nerves and easing sleep, does indeed have mild sedative effects. Mint, for stomach troubles, reduces spasms and aids digestion. Nettle, used to cleanse the blood, contains vitamins and iron. These remedies, scattered through medieval texts, reveal a sophisticated observational tradition. The strangeness lies not in their effectiveness, but in their presentation, wrapped in symbolic language, combined with other odd ingredients, but anchored in plants that truly work. Sometimes the delivery method itself helped. Strong-smelling salves and ointments comforted patients with their aromas, easing anxiety. Warm poultices increased circulation, reduced stiffness, and encouraged healing. Vinegar washes disinfected wounds, even if the healers spoke of cutting humors rather than bacteria. In these cases, the cure worked, not because the theory was correct, but because the practice aligned with real biological effects. What fascinates us most is how these remedies reveal continuity. Medicine has always been about experimentation, about observing patterns, keeping what helps, discarding what harms. Medieval healers lacked microscopes and laboratories, but they had eyes, hands, and memory. They saw that wounds treated with honey healed better, that willow bark eased fevers, that garlic reduced swelling. They did not understand molecules, but they understood outcomes. Their strangeness was often just science in disguise, waiting for modern language to explain it. And perhaps this is the deeper lesson, that human beings across time are united by the same drive to heal. Whether in a modern hospital or a medieval cottage, the goal is the same: to reduce pain, to comfort, to save. The tools differ, the theories change, but the impulse endures. Strange remedies remind us that even in the darkest centuries, people were not helpless. They were experimenting, innovating, and sometimes succeeding in ways we still respect. As you drift into sleep tonight, imagine a medieval healer leaning over a table of ingredients: a jar of honey, a bundle of garlic, strips of willow bark, a pot of vinegar. To us, this looks like cooking. To them, it was survival. Strange though their mixtures seem, some of them truly worked, and in that simple truth we see not folly, but resilience, not nonsense, but wisdom hidden in plain sight.
What lingers when the jars are emptied, when the plasters dry, when the traveling healers vanish into history? Strange remedies of the medieval world may sound like curiosities, odd footnotes in the story of medicine, but their legacy is far larger than a list of odd ingredients. They shaped how people thought about health, how they trusted or doubted healers, how knowledge moved across generations, and even how modern medicine grew. In every peculiar ointment or bizarre potion lies a fragment of continuity, a thread that connects the medieval imagination to the science we know today. To dismiss them as mere folly is to miss the truth that medicine evolves not in leaps of genius alone, but in centuries of trial, error, and memory. The first legacy is persistence. Many strange cures survived far beyond the Middle Ages, echoing in folk medicine for centuries. Honey still coats sore throats. Garlic still appears in home remedies. Nettle tea is still sipped for vitality. Even the leech, ridiculed for centuries, quietly returned to modern hospitals, its anticoagulants now valued in delicate surgeries. What was once medieval superstition is sometimes simply medicine rediscovered. These echoes remind us that the border between weird and useful is thinner than we think. Another legacy lies in the spirit of experimentation. Medieval healers did not have laboratories, but they observed carefully.
They watched wounds heal faster with honey, noted which herbs eased fevers, and passed these insights to apprentices and families. Even when their theories about humors and stars were wrong, their methods of watching and recording laid foundations for medical tradition. To test, to repeat, to refine, this is the beginning of science, though they would not have called it that. Their strange cures were stepping stones, the groundwork upon which later discoveries were built. The legacy also includes cautionary tales. Bloodletting, pursued with such confidence, sometimes harmed more than it helped. Strange mixtures of toxic metals or spoiled ingredients may have poisoned as often as they cured. These mistakes, carried forward by blind tradition, remind us that medicine must always question itself. The past teaches us not only what to keep, but what to discard. Progress is born not only from success, but from failure recognized and corrected. Culturally, medieval medicine left behind a vision of care that was deeply personal. Remedies were made by hand, tailored to the individual, often by someone who knew the patient intimately. The act of healing was physical, sensory, immediate. Balms spread by hand, herbs boiled in the kitchen, plasters tied with cloth. This intimacy is easy to lose in modern medicine's efficiency. Yet even today, patients long for not only treatment but attention, not only pills but presence. The legacy of medieval cures is a reminder that care is as important as cure, and that medicine is always a human relationship before it is a science. There is also the legacy of imagination. To us, snail slime in a plaster or powdered antler in a drink seems absurd. But to medieval people, these ingredients carried symbolic meaning, strength, resilience, healing drawn from the natural world. While the symbolism was not scientific, the impulse behind it was profound, the belief that nature held answers if only one could find them. Modern medicine, in its laboratories and trials, still holds to this same impulse. We extract compounds from plants, we study animal venoms for new drugs, we turn to the earth and seas for untapped cures. The medieval belief in nature's pharmacy was not wrong. It was in fact the seed of truths we still pursue. Knowledge transmission is another inheritance. The strange recipes of medieval healers traveled through manuscripts, markets, and memory, shaping folk medicine far beyond their time. A grandmother's remedy whispered in a village might trace its roots to a medieval apothecary's book. A poultice used by peasants in the 18th century might echo a recipe written down in the 13th. This continuity shows how stubborn knowledge can be, how even the oddest practices can outlive empires, carried by trust, tradition, and the simple desire to heal. And finally, there is the legacy of humility. When we look back at medieval medicine, it is easy to laugh, to judge, to call it primitive. But we forget that centuries from now, our own treatments may look just as strange. Needles piercing skin, chemicals with long lists of side effects, machines humming around fragile bodies. Future generations may wonder how we ever thought these were sensible. The medieval world reminds us that all medicine is provisional, all knowledge incomplete. What matters is not that they were wrong, but that they tried, and that through their trying, we have arrived where we are. So what did medieval medicine leave behind? More than jars of herbs and odd prescriptions, it left behind a culture of curiosity, a tradition of care, and a foundation of trial and error that shaped the future. It left behind remedies that still work, lessons about mistakes, and an enduring sense that healing is both science and art. Most of all, it left behind a reminder that human beings across all centuries share the same struggle against pain and sickness, and the same creativity in facing it. As you rest now, Imagine the last embers of a medieval hearth fading. On the table, a jar of honey glows faintly. A bundle of herbs hangs drying. A small bowl of ointment waits for use. The healer is gone. The house is quiet. Centuries have passed. Yet the legacy of those strange cures remains, whispering across time. Fragile, peculiar, but enduring. They remind us not only of how far we have come, but of how much we owe to those who lived, healed, and hoped before us.
We have walked a long road tonight, through kitchens and gardens, markets and apothecaries, across fields and towns where healers carried their strange jars and powders. We have watched leeches at work, smelled herbs boiling in vinegar, seen ointments of fat and wax smeared across aching skin. We have listened to wandering healers calling out their remedies in crowded squares. And we have leaned close to the quiet hands of mothers stirring potions by firelight. Many of these cures seemed odd, even absurd to our modern eyes. And yet again and again, we found that some of them held surprising truths, small fragments of effectiveness wrapped in layers of tradition, trial, and hope. The legacy of medieval medicine is not only the remedies themselves, but the spirit behind them. A spirit of persistence in the face of uncertainty, a spirit of imagination when tools were few and knowledge was fragile, a spirit of care where the act of touching, soothing, and comforting was as important as the cure. These are not relics of the past. They are threads woven into our present, reminders that healing is not only about science, but about humanity, about presence, about the courage to try. As we leave this journey, it is worth remembering that medicine has always been a story of progress mixed with error, brilliance tempered by failure. What seems foolish now may be wisdom rediscovered centuries later. What we believe certain today may be questioned tomorrow. History teaches us humility, but also gratitude for those who experimented, observed, and passed knowledge forward, however imperfectly. Without them, the path to where we stand now would have been darker, lonelier, more uncertain. So let the images of those strange remedies fade gently in your mind. The glimmer of honey on a wound, the faint scent of rosemary in a balm, the hush of a healer's hand pressing a warm cloth onto fevered skin. Let them settle, not as curiosities, but as quiet reminders of the continuity of care across time. Humanity has always sought to heal, and in that effort, no matter how strange, there is dignity. Now the journey is complete. The fire burns low, the jars are empty, and the healer's hands are still. The strange cures of the medieval world have whispered their stories, and their voices grow faint once more. Rest in the knowledge that even in the strangest corners of history, there is kindness, resilience, and hope. Good night, and may the echoes of the past carry you softly into sleep.